So, whatever happened to that late 1970s, early 1980s science fiction adventure series, Buck Rogers in the 25th Century? Let's find out. Movies,
Music and monsters.
Hey guys, Dan Monroe here, talking about movies, music, and monsters. Buck Rogers in the 25th Century. I honestly have to admit that this show was definitely a guilty pleasure of mine back in 1979 because I was just clamoring for anything that I could find that reminded me of Star Wars with cool robots, awesome spaceships, and nifty laser guns. And yes, the show today seems a little dated, and yes, the second season didn't quite live up to the expectations of the first, but there's definitely no way to deny the fact that Buck Rogers was not only a very important part of sci-fi television history, but also a pretty darn fun show to watch. And I loved this show. To me, in the late 1970s, there was only three things: Star Wars, Battlestar Galactica, and Buck Rogers in the 25th Century. So grab your favorite cybernetic ambu quad and a bucket of stale popcorn and let's dive in. Special thanks once again to James Small for providing a ton of photos and information about Buck Rogers that I now get to pass on to all of you guys. Once again inspired by the success of Star Wars and not unlike Battlestar Galactica, Universal Pictures began developing Buck Rogers for television with Glenn A. Larson spearheading the production. And again, similar to Galactica's pilot being released theatrically prior to the production of the TV series, Universal decided to do the same thing with the Buck Rogers pilot hitting theaters on March 30th, 1979. And believe it or not, the box office returns were actually pretty good. So Buck Rogers got greenlit for a weekly series, which started airing in September of 1979 with a slightly modified version of the theatrical release. Kind of interesting, those super cool Terran starfighters from Buck Rogers were originally Ralph McQuarrie's version of the original Viper from Battlestar Galactica. To me, the theatrical version always seemed a little on the dark side, where the TV series seemed to take a much lighter approach with the story. Like in the movie, I always thought it was really cool that we got to see those weird mutant people out in the barren wastelands of Earth. But once the series hit, all of that was sort of dropped, and a lot of times when Buck was outside the city, everything instead looked really lush and green. The series had an overall budget of $800,000 per episode, which, believe me, was certainly a ton of cash for a weekly TV series in the late 1970s and early 80s. Kinda cool. The effects team used a lot of stock shots for futuristic Earth buildings that were really shots of the Bonaventure Hotel in downtown Los Angeles and shots of the remaining national pavilions of Expo 67. The super cool opening credits with that outstanding vocal performance by William Conrad used actual stock footage from both the Apollo 4 and Apollo 6 launches. And the cast of this show was just awesome in my opinion. Gil Gerard as Buck Rogers, to me, was the absolute perfect combination of your classic sci-fi action hero and flirtatious, yet charming, 25th century bachelor. It's interesting that the producers actually wanted somebody a lot younger to play Buck Rogers, like somebody in their early 20s. But Gil Gerard gave such an impressive audition to the production team that they decided to base the character around the actor rather than the actor around the character. And get this, who was producer Glenn A. Larson's first choice to play Buck Rogers? Kurt Russell. Pretty cool. Erin Gray, who played Wilma, was not only super hot, but she almost wasn't in the TV series at all. She obviously played Wilma in the movie, but wasn't entirely sure if she was going to return for the TV series, so they cast a woman named Juanine Clay, who did end up getting a role in the first season episode Vegas in Space. But then, luckily, Erin Gray decided to return and reprise her role as Wilma for the TV series. I don't know what I liked more about Wilma, her tough, no-nonsense, authoritative personality, or those incredibly tight spacesuits. I guess I would have to go with the spacesuits. You know, I watch a lot of YouTube videos, and I've seen a lot of sponsor ads promoting products, and it always makes me wonder, quite frankly, does the creator really believe in the product? Well, you'll be happy to know that I only take on products that I not only personally use, but also really believe in. AG1 is a foundational nutritional supplement that I've heard a lot about. AG1 reached out to me about a month ago, sent me a 1-month supply of their product, and I honestly have to tell you that this stuff is really quite amazing. I drink AG1 in the mornings, and it's literally become a morning daily ritual, and I know it sounds funny, but you can feel the effects almost immediately. There's literally a burst or rush of energy that I get after I drink it, and the effects of that surprisingly last pretty much all day. I also do feel as if I've been sleeping better. I feel less bloated. I feel as if my mental clarity and focus has definitely improved. I don't know. I guess I would just have to say that I feel better. Every single serving of AG1 includes over 75 ingredients containing vitamins, minerals, pre- and probiotics, antioxidants. There's no gluten, no dairy, no animal byproducts, but literally gives me everything I need all at once, all in one shot. You literally just mix 1 scoop in some cold water, shake it up, drink it down, and bingo, you're done. Nothing really good is cheap, but I do have to say that taking AG1 every morning completely alleviates the need for a whole pile of vitamins and supplements that I no longer need to spend any money on every month. If you would like to try AG1 yourself, head over to the link in the description below to get a free 1-year supply of AG vitamin D3 plus 5 AG1 travel packs with your first purchase of AG1. So, AG1, give it a shot. You might just feel better. Okay, back to Buck Rogers. A little bit like Don and Judy from Lost in Space, a romantic relationship was more or less hinted at between Wilma and Buck, but the show never really expanded on that at all for some reason. Erin Gray was a brunette, but the producers absolutely demanded that Wilma needed to be, of course, a blonde. So they would have to dye Erin's hair throughout the course of the season, at least until season 2, when she was suddenly, for some reason, allowed to go back to being a brunette again. Gil Gerard, quite frankly, who played Buck, was really unhappy with the direction that the network and the writers were taking with his character. He really wanted Buck Rogers to be a much deeper character than we eventually saw, and constantly complained that the writers were simply trying to, and I quote, turn him into some sort of smartass action hero.
Well, I spent the entire year, last year, fighting for better scripts and better storylines, shows with more substance to them. Never got them. I felt that overall last year that Buck Rogers was a very shallow show, that it never really attained the kind of stature and the kind of depth of characterization that it could have.
Gerard himself often clashed with not only the NBC executives, but also the writers and the script editors from the show, refusing to perform lines that he didn't think were suitable to his character, to the point where the network even threatened legal action against him if he continued to be problematic with the production. Man, that really stinks. Why can't everybody just get along? Tim O'Connor has always been one of my favorite character actors, and I was really happy to see him cast as Dr. Hewer in the show. Prior to Buck Rogers, I remember seeing Tim O'Connor, I think, in several episodes of Columbo. Columbo! Video on that coming soon. Stay tuned. And don't forget about the costumes. All those wonderful, amazing, glorious, skimpy, outstanding costumes. Okay, I know a lot of people thought that Tweaky, Buck's ambu-quad partner in crime, was a bit on the goofy, silly side. But, I don't know, I thought it was actually a pretty cool story aspect to have this generic robot picking up habits and phrases from his human counterpart and eventually, in my opinion, developing into a pretty unique sci-fi character. Felix Cilia was the very busy actor who physically got inside that little tiny robot costume, and he actually got his career started as a performer in the circus, but then moved on to Hollywood movies and TV shows including Bonanza, Cousin It on The Addams Family, the original Star Trek, the original Planet of the Apes film, Puffin' Stuff, Bewitched, and the list literally goes on and on. The special effects team also made a smaller miniature Tweaky for the episode Tweaky is Missing, where the ambu-quad needed to be seen tumbling through space, a stunt that was just a little too complicated or dangerous for the actor inside the suit. Dr. Theopolis was pretty cool, who was voiced by, and I didn't know this, 2 different people. Howard Flynn did the voice in the theatrical pilot film, and American television actor Eric Server did the voice in the first season. Well, there's no way to discuss the first season of Buck Rogers without mentioning everyone's favorite, and believe me, I do mean a 12-year-old boy's favorite arch-villain, Princess Ardala, whose goal was to conquer the Earth while making Buck Rogers her personal consort. Pamela Hensley was really popular in Hollywood from 1970 through 1985. It's weird Princess Ardala was only in 4 episodes for some reason, but every time I think of Buck Rogers in the 25th century, my mind, for some reason, seems to wander to her. Well, regardless of how unhappy Gil Gerard was with Season 1, he did agree to return for Season 2, which was almost a completely different show. The format of the show changed from defending the Earth from external threats to placing the characters on board a ship called the Searcher on a mission to seek out the lost, scattered tribes of humanity. Wow, doesn't that sound almost identical to the premise of another Glenn A. Larson show just 2 years earlier? Sadly, we also lost a ton of regular characters from the first season and replaced them, in my opinion, with characters that were nowhere near as effective to the story. They added a character named Admiral Asimov who really didn't do much of anything other than he was the commander of the Searcher. They added some friendly little old man named Dr. Goodfellow, played by Wilfred Hyde White, and probably, in my opinion, the most obnoxious robotic character ever produced for a TV show or movie, Crichton, an arrogant, snobby robot who is just completely unlikable every single time he's on the screen. However, I did think that the character of Hawk, played by Tom Christopher, was really pretty cool and a very interesting addition to the show. You know, I always thought it might have been more interesting if Hawk had continued to be the bad guy through all of Season 2, maybe until the very last show when he sort of had a change of heart. He made such a cool villain, but that's just not the way it went down. Wilma, this time around, she basically did Nothing. She just wore some weird flight attendant suit and stayed on the ship. Again. Why? Tweaky's voice was also different in most of the second season, but there was actually a pretty good reason for that. Mel Blanc, the guy who did the voice in season 1, had a really bad illness, so he was briefly replaced by another voice actor named Bob Elliott for the first 7 episodes of season 2. This show obviously took place in the late 70s, early 80s, and that, my friends, can only mean one thing: guest stars. And man, did this show have a lot of those. Peter Graves, Jamie Lee Curtis, Gary Coleman, Jack Palance, Sid Haig, Buster Crabbe, who was the original Buck Rogers in the 1930s. Even some of the famous Batman villains co-starred on the show, including Cesar Romero, Frank Gorshin, Roddy McDowell, and even Julie Newmar. And even though Gil Gerard was initially pleased with all the changes that the network made for season 2, he unfortunately again became very unhappy with the show. The network ratings for Buck Rogers dropped rapidly after the premiere of season 2, and along with an increasingly problematic star, NBC canceled the entire series at the end of an 11-episode season. Well, Buck Rogers came and Buck Rogers went, but that certainly wasn't the end of this interesting, even though somewhat troubled TV show. Okay, but whatever happened to all the really cool models, costumes, and props from Buck Rogers? Well, one of Gil Gerard's flashy gold jackets sold in auction back in 2020 for about $3,000. Aaron Gray's Starfighter helmet sold in 2011 for over $3,000. One of the original Hero Buck Rogers blaster pistols sold at a heritage auction just last year for over $10,000. And now, my friends, stuff really starts to get expensive. The original Ranger 3 shuttle filming miniature sold last year for over $27,000. Buck's personal Starfighter miniature sold at the same auction for $40,000, and the Draconian Marauder Hatcher Fighter Hero filming miniature sold at Heritage Auctions last year for over $62,000. How cool is that? Okay, fine, but where's Tweaky? Here and there, you might find an occasional headpiece or faceplate, but the only complete Tweaky costume that I know of anyway was in Paul Allen's Science Fiction Hall of Fame Museum in Seattle, Washington. However, after the museum changed hands and became the Museum of Pop Culture, or MoPop, in Seattle, a lot of the items were sold in 2023, including the original stunt robot from Lost in Space, restored by Fred Barton, and here he is, folks, Tweaky. This prop is just amazing to see up close. You can see a lot of the obvious wear and tear from over the years, as well as some deterioration of the rubber in the shoulder sections, but overall it's absolutely amazing to see that this suit not only still exists, but is in such amazing condition. I'm not sure where Tweaky ended up after the auction, but he did sell for a staggering $35,750. The enormous Draconia ship was in really bad condition after the show, but was brilliantly restored by Ed Miarecki and his team at FX Models. Absolutely amazing to see that these enormous model props not only survived, but were so beautifully restored to preserve them for future generations to enjoy. This is absolutely awesome. Here are photos of the full-size Starfighter prop used in the production of Buck Rogers. These amazing photographs of the one and only full-size starship were taken on the back lot of Universal Studios during the mid-1980s, and sadly, like most of the amazing props back in the day, this incredible starfighter was simply left outside to rot, and then eventually just thrown out. What a shame, but that's showbiz. Now, as far as good old Dr. Theopolis goes, I was amazed. Apparently, he does still exist and seems to be in incredible condition. I was not able to find out exactly who owns this amazing piece, but it looks as if it's on at least part of one of the original Tweaky costumes, but it's great to see that this prop still exists in such amazing condition. Okay, but what about all the really cool Buck Rogers toys? Well, not one but two different sets of action figures were produced by Mego, including a line of 12-inch figures and the standard 3.75-inch figures, along with some really cool spaceship toys. We also had a Milton Bradley game, jigsaw puzzles, model kits, die-cast toys, trading cards, and yes, even the good old-fashioned metal lunchbox. Ben Cooper even produced a really nifty-looking Tweaky Halloween costume, which, if you can find one in good condition, goes for quite the pretty penny. The theatrical version of Buck Rogers was released on VHS, Betamax, and Laserdisc in 1981. Universal Studios released the complete series on DVD in November of 2004, even though the pilot episode on the disc was the theatrical version and not the television version. But eventually, KL Studio Classics finally released Buck Rogers on Blu-ray in November of 2020, containing not only all the episodes of Season 1 and 2, but also the original pilot theatrical version seen here for the first time in high definition. Buck Rogers in the 25th century certainly might not have been everybody's favorite cup of tea, but it did not only find its place in classic sci-fi television, but also in the hearts of the audience that it was originally made for. Kids, paving the way, at least creatively, for so many future sci-fi television shows and movies like V, Babylon 5, Starship Troopers, Stargate SG-1, The Terminator, The Matrix, Guardians of the Galaxy, and so many more. We could be here all day, but that, my friends, is the topic of another video. I really hope you guys enjoyed that deep dive into Buck Rogers in the 25th century, and if you did, and you like this kind of stuff, please consider subscribing to the channel. I've got a whole bunch of new videos coming up really soon that I know you guys are just gonna dig. And please, feel free to stop back anytime as we continue our conversation on movies, music, and monsters. Movies,
Music and monsters.